Mr. Ray, if we can have a roll call on the motion by Mr. Perlman and second by Ms. Ryan.
America.
Was it?
You're next. It's America's up.
Yes.
Palermo.
Can you clarify again for me, what's the vote on exactly?
So there was a motion to begin the process for the application for interim superintendent, amended with a motion to accept applications directly to the OPS Human Resources Department, which would lead the effort and report findings back to the board for review.
So we're going to have inside HR make a decision that could possibly have internal candidates? No.
No, HR would just be to clarify, HR would be collecting the applications to give to the board, similar to when we appointed Dr. Holman. They collected the applications everyone submitted for the board vacancy and then gave to us. They would not be making any type of narrowing down decision. Just to clarify so everyone's aware. They would just be collecting them
Distributing.
to give to us.
Point of order, we're in a roll call vote. I understand the clarification, but we should be voting. We had opportunity for discussion on this vote.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. No.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Scanlon.
No.
Snow.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Goding.
No.
Hallman.
Aye.
6-0.
Motion passes. So we will then discuss what we want this application to look like. Because it can be an actual application, it can be a resume and cover letter, it can be the items that are listed above, it can be any combination of those. I think when we had our board vacancy, we had a cover letter, essays, and recommendation, and resume. And I can't remember what Ms. Neelish Brash said was in the last application for the last interim.
I believe they had a cover sheet application. Is that correct, Mr. Wright?
Mr.
I have
Ray.
I have the application that was used last year, so I'll pass it, or not last year, sorry. In the previous interim search, I'll pass that around.
Mr. Snow.
So this is typically any job you apply, you just fill this out. I mean, and it also goes for them to list their certifications, if they're expired, active. I think this is very thorough. I think if this is something the board wants to use, then my suggestion, I would say we add a resume and a cover letter. I don't think we would need a reference because this packet actually has a section for references. I guess we'll leave that up for discussion before someone makes a motion.
And I would include that I think it makes sense in this discussion to talk about how long the application should be open for and when it should be due. So that can be combined as one motion and discussion versus two separate discussions. No, Mr. Snow?
So just my opinion of it, Just going back to Ms. Williams' comments about how we need to do this correctly and also not do it outside of regular board meetings, just for transparency and having the community have that opportunity to attend these meetings. I think if someone's interested in the job, most likely, they already know they're interested, even if they didn't tell us or not. So I think putting this out for a week and ended it on, if it's the 10th, that could be collected and given to board members, and we come back on the 17th. That's just my opinion on that. So just trying to engage my colleagues in a conversation.
And Mr. Ray, I saw you back checking with,
Not to your
resources.
colleague, clearly. So if we make this decision, HR is asking for at least one business day to get it posted. Just, as you discussed, that we do need some time to prep. It's not just a switch that we'll be able to turn on.
so am I correct in reading that as the soonest that would be able to be posted would be the 5th, which would be Wednesday?
Correct.
Mr. Perlman?
I don't know how many of these issues we're going to have to go through one by one, but that is such a basic one that I would make a motion to accept applications until April 10th.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second to accept applications until April 10th. Ms. Williams?
Doing it on the 5th to the 10th, it gives you 5 days. I would like to look at maybe the 12th, which says a week, and then you have several days before the next board meeting to get everything together and compiled for the board meeting.
That's fair. I'll amend the motion to April 12th.
Second.
Okay, motion has been changed to accept applications until April 12th. Is there any additional board discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please, Mr. Ray.
Palermo,
Aye.
Perlman,
Aye.
Ryan, Scanlon,
No.
Snow,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Gadding,
No.
Holman,
Aye.
America.
Aye.
7-0.
Okay, we have a deadline set. We need to determine what we want them to actually submit. Do we want just an application similar to the one that was passed out that we used last time? Do we want them to attach cover letter? It looks like in this one, they had some two open-ended questions that they were asked to submit answers to as well.
My question was going to be for Dr. Holman. Dr. Holman, I believe it's your job. You guys are going through a search as well. What did those applicants actually submit?
They submitted a VITA, the actual application, list of publications, presentations. It's a little bit different for higher ed, but, and there were no type of open-ended questions at all.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
I guess in this with for me, I don't know if I really agree with the particular application itself. I think a cover letter and a resume would suffice. If we're going to interview potential candidates, then we will have the opportunity to ask those open-ended questions in a roundtable forum. I just think that that's just an unnecessary piece of paper. And the qualified candidates that the community has brought forward, I just honestly don't believe that the physical application for the interim would be necessary.
Dr. Holman?
Bouncing off of what Ms. Williams said, if we were not to actually submit a formal application, the legal information, how would we obtain that? Would we be able to just have a document with those questions on there? Or like your citizenship questions?
I will look to
Your residency?
district staff. Let's
So what legal information are you talking about? A background check? Or what, I mean,
No, as
what
far
are
as like citizenship questions, legal residency, those type of questions that are in typical applications. I don't know if there has to be something formal, or if we can just have a document that they can just
whatever the
those.
board would prefer?
Mr. Snow?
Ms. Neelis Brash, please, if we go in with Ms. Holman and Ms. Williams talked about a resume, cover letter, you were talking about list of legal, is there something that in-house counsel that you can add on there to make sure that they have residency in the United States that meet all legal ramifications so that
We
we're
would
not
have-
getting applicants that are,
We would have typical application requirements. I'm sorry, I was thinking you were phrasing it in two ways, and as I was walking away, I thought either or is what you were saying. My apologies. We could come up with an application that would be those basic things that you would be legally required to do. There would be a few of those pieces of information that you could obtain. You could do a more extensive application that's fairly basic, that has, address of individual and have them fill out. We have a typical form. I think that Charles has a process that's already created. We could certainly utilize that current process and have them fill out that current application as part of that if the board thinks that that would be appropriate. Or we can have a very simple application with, those narrowly tailored pieces of information on there. So.
Ms. Williams.
Ms. Williams?
I would ask just that we can do a quick one-pager with the necessary information that we have, or that we need, and make it just very simple.
And I think that would be, sounds like on the document that's in front of you, page 4 is kind of the legal information questions. I think we ask of everyone applying to the district, and the confirmation that what you're saying is correct. And then there is in the middle a question regarding whether or not you have a Nebraska superintendent certification, which I would assume we want to include as well.
So you're talking about page 2 and 4?
Not all of page 2, the certification information on page 2. Further discussion or motions? There is not currently a motion.
I move to have the applicant submit a resume, a cover letter, and a information sheet with address, type of certifications. I'm looking at in-house counsel, making sure I'm not forgetting anything that's going to be on that information sheet. Necessary legal information. Yeah, I think it will.
You could probably do necessary legal information. You could also probably do a standard HR form. You could say that.
Necessary legal information. Do I have to read it again?
Second.
I have that you are moving to have the application consist of submitting resume, cover letter, and an information sheet containing necessary legal information.
Correct.
All right, and that was moved by Mr. Snow and seconded by Dr. Holman? Right, okay. Further discussion? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Ray.
Perlman,
Aye.
Bryan,
Aye.
Scanlon,
No.
Snow,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Gadding,
Aye.
Hallman,
Aye.
America,
Aye.
Palermo.
Aye.
8 aye.
I think our final discussion item really would be, what does that look like when the applications are given to us? Or, Mr. Ray?
I have a question before you move to that. One important point that we discussed in the accountability committee is if you were going to allow the interim to also apply for the superintendent position. So that's a decision that this board will have to make. I believe it was part of the requirement of the last interim position that they could not apply to be superintendent.
True, and we do need to decide that tonight so that we can let anyone who's applying know that information, whether or not they are allowed to apply for the full position. I will say I went to different sessions than Mrs. Gotting did, but heard the same exact thing from multiple state associations that work and conduct superintendent searches, that their recommendation is always that the person that is applying to be interim is not allowed to apply for the full superintendent position, because to any other applicants, it looks like they are basically receiving an on-the-job interview. And if we are planning on doing a full search after the interim, that can have a negative effect on receiving applications during that search. Other discussion or motions? Ms. Williams?
Well, on this particular, we've had so much challenge, to put it lightly, with this process. I have to say, I don't know if I would be comfortable with that particular decision.
Mr. Snow?
I would be in favor of having it open to allow the interim superintendent to be able to apply for the full superintendent job.
Other, yeah.
I'll make a
Mr.
motion if I just wanted to hear everybody else's.
Are you making a motion?
I move to allow the interim superintendent to apply for the full superintendent job.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Snow and a second by Mr. Perlman to allow the interim superintendent to apply for the full superintendent position. Is there any additional discussion? Mrs. Gotting?
I'll vote no on that, simply because I think I heard pretty unanimously from state school boards associations all over the country that that's not probably the best practice when you're going out trying to find a superintendent. And I just think it was not the practice that was used last time. I think it's sends a different message, but as a board, clearly that's the decision this board needs to make.
Is there any other board discussion? Seeing, or Ms. Williams?
So thank you, Mrs. Gotting, for bringing that up. And I guess, again, I would ask the full board to weigh in on this, because this is a decision that we are going to have to make together. And if this indeed is going to be a true interim, then we need to have that full disclosure discussion this evening. And if it's not, we also need to have that full disclosure discussion this evening as well.
Mr. Scanlon?
I do not support the intern superintendent being able to apply for the permanent superintendent job.
Other? Mr. Snow?
So my justification of the reason why leaving the interim superintendent search open is if we say that they cannot apply for the superintendent job, then we're limiting the amount of people or the people that are possibly interested in being the interim. So then that possibly leaves anybody that's about to retire or somebody that is retired that doesn't want the job. So for superintendent, so I think leaving it open allows those individuals who might be OPS employees or might be employees throughout the state that might be interested in the superintendent job, but also willing to give it a try to be interim superintendent until they can apply for the full job. So that's just my justification on that.
Ms. Williams?
Ms. Merica, I would ask that you ask each board member, to me, this is important that we all have a voice before we make a vote. And I need to hear from everyone before I can make my final decision. Thank you.
Miss Ryan.
I agree with Mr. Snow on this. I think we need to allow people who are interested to apply, and if they want to apply for the actual position, then we should allow them to and not limit it.
Mr. Palermo.
Thank you, Madam President. I would say that I would be against the interim being able to apply for the superintendent job, because if they wanted the superintendent job, they should have applied the first time.
Do either of you two want to jump in?
I thought I already
Mr.
commented on
Frobin?
this, because I seconded the motion, but
All you said was second, you didn't comment,
But
so I
that
didn't know
does-
if you
that
had
doesn't
that
anything else
you
to
agree.
but that
add.
indicated approval, but I'll go ahead and surprise you and say I've changed my mind. I agree with Vinnie, so I would oppose it.
Dr. Holman?
I think I understand both sides of what could potentially be an issue, I guess, in the end. I can understand other candidates not being as willing to apply for the superintendency due to the fact that the interim has had on-the-job experience with the actual district. However, I also think that it would limit us if we did not allow the interim the opportunity to apply for the superintendency. So I'd say more so I'm on the side of allowing the interim to apply for the superintendency.
I think, I spoke already after the motion was made, Ms. Williams, that hearing from multiple state associations that the negative effects that can happen when you are doing a superintendent search after an interim, that I would not be supportive of allowing them to apply for a superintendent position.
So, I too, over the weekend, was at the NSBA, and as a delegate of the Council of Urban Boards of Education. Lots of commentary about this search. And my challenge with saying, no, the interim cannot apply, is that I've heard from very qualified candidates across the country stating that what has happened here with this search, they would never apply right now. And that challenges me as well. And so, although I also see both sides, I would hate for us to be in this predicament a year from now and going through this process again. So at this time, I'm actually ready to vote.
Okay, seeing no other discussion, Mr. Ray, if we can have a roll call on the motion to allow the interim, allow applicants for the, or allow the interim to apply for the full superintendent position.
Ryan.
Aye.
Scanlon.
No.
Snow.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Gadding.
No.
Holman.
Aye.
Merrica.
No.
Palermo.
No.
Perlman.
No.
4 aye, 5 no.
Motion fails. Ms. Williams?
So would you clarify for the public what that motion is?
The motion was to allow the interim to apply for the superintendent position.
So meaning to the public then, that the interim cannot apply for the superintendent? That's what I'm sorry, that's what I was looking for, just so it's clear, public record, everyone is on the same page.
Correct. That vote would indicate that the interim cannot apply for the full superintendent position. Next thing would be what, after we have people submit applications, what is the next step? Are we bringing them all to the board meeting on the 17th? Are we conducting interviews? What does that look like? Mr. Perlman?
Well, just a minor clarification, because we're talking about candidates submitting applications to the OPS Human Resources Department, but I would ask that those applicants go to one person, and that one person keep every applicant's name confidential. So I move for that motion.
Are you specifying a specific person they go to? Because otherwise, that is a very vague motion.
Charles Wakefield. Yeah, Charles Wakefield. I just feel there's so that's my motion, that all applications be submitted to Charles Wakefield, and those applicants' names be held confidential.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Perlman and a second by Ms. Williams, and I think I see Megan running.
Oh, I have a question.
I think
Can
we
I ask
need
my question?
clarification from the board as to whether or not they're all finalists. All finalists would be deemed a public record. If they were semi-finalists, they would not be deemed a public record, and so I think we need a clarification from you with regard to that.
And that was actually going to be my question, not worded as well. Ms. Williams?
I guess my question would be, not that I have nothing against Mr. Wakefield, but my question would be why Mr. Wakefield and why not Mr. Ray, as Mr. Ray is the board secretary. He works directly with us, and Mr. Wakefield is Mr. Evans' employee on the collection of those applications. And then Mr. Ray would be working with board leadership and whomever the new accountability committee is to vet those candidates.
Mr. Perlman?
Point very well taken. I will amend that motion to have the applicant submitted to Matt Ray.
And I'll amend that since I made the second. And for the record, just because you second doesn't always mean that you agree with the motion.
That is a very true fact.
I second that.
All right, so we have a motion to have all applications be, based on our prior motion that we passed, was to have them go through HR, but then they would go to Mr. Ray. Based on this new motion to have all applications submitted to Mr. Ray. Mrs. Gotti?
So I'm still confused about the semifinalist, finalist piece of that motion.
Well,
That is something we have to determine as a board. If we are labeling them as we calling the applicants finalists that all have to be made public? Are we getting all the applications and then as a board determining who the finalists are? That is something as a board we have to determine.
Ms. Merico, doesn't it?
Yes.
To me, it seems like that should be part of that motion. I mean,
Right.
we've had a lot of motions.
I would
I think we could wrap it up.
concur.
well, I would think that implicit in keeping the names confidential and the requirement that to do so would, to be calling them semifinalists, I would deem them to be semifinalists. Right? I mean, so.
Ms. Williams?
Okay, so I made a request earlier that the accountability committee membership look at some change. And so if that is the role of the accountability committee, then the accountability committee should vet those candidates and bring their recommendations to the full board, not any other conversation. That way, we don't have to have the full, I mean, I think that's the way that this process works. And so as opposed to 9 people haggling over candidates, I would like some recommendations of those candidates from the accountability committee. That's my personal request.
Mr. Snow?
Ms. Williams, would you want a list of everyone that has applied, even if they weren't the recommended candidates from the accountability committee?
Well, I think that's more of a question for legal, if it's a if it's a public list or if it's not. I mean, I personally would rather have those candidates interested. I would rather it be public because I think the public should know who's interested with this conversation. But again, it's a
agree.
legal conversation.
The reason why I bring that up is I don't want the accountability committee to come up with 3 recommended candidates, and let's say there are a number of board members, that's not the candidate they wanted, and their top one wasn't in the top 3, and then we go back to where we started. Ms. Niels Brash, can you elaborate on, I think, Ben's suggestion on
So
public or
if they're
not?
applicants, they're applicants. If someone deems them to be finalists, or we have a pool of 4 or less, then we have finalists for that pool of candidates. So if they are submitting applications and the accountability committee, the full board deem that these 3 or 4 individuals are the finalists for the interim position, then those would be the finalist names and they would be released. Let's say the board got 10 applications and the accountability, let's say several individuals did not have the requisite certification perhaps, then those would simply be applicants. They wouldn't be names that the accountability committee could necessarily have to release in that process.
So with that, Ms. Williams, would you be okay with if we, and I'm just throwing this out there, if we was collected by Mr. Ray and the accountability committee came up with the top 3 candidates, and also, I don't know if we could, under the attorney-client privilege, just amongst board and closed session, show the list of the entire individuals that applied. I'm just trying to make this process so you would know how many people applied.
I'm fine with that. You would have to check with the full board as well to get their
Okay,
input as
I'm
well.
just trying to,
Yep.
so we can get a starting point. Anybody else? On,
I'm okay with that.
okay,
Can somebody just
correct.
clarify what we're,
Yes,
what
'cause
the
that-
motion is,
Our
what we're voting on?
motion was to have all applications go to Mr. Ray and for those applications to be kept confidential.
Yeah.
So if anyone would like to move to amend or change that motion or withdraw that motion and submit a new motion based on the board discussion,
You-
could certainly do that.
If you agreed with my idea, Mr. Perlman, you would amend your motion and say, I would agree that all applications go to Mr. Ray and the accountability committee. And the accountability committee will make a recommendation for the top 3 candidates.
With the rest of the board seeing the list of all
Yes,
applicants.
with the rest of the board seeing, yes, correct.
Yes, I would amend my motion to reflect that.
Second, do you want me?
Who had seconded
I
the,
seconded.
you seconded the original motion?
Yes. So the motion on the floor is?
Okay, so the motion on the floor now is to have all the applications go to Mr. Ray and the Accountability Committee, with the Accountability Committee making a recommendation of the top 3 candidates, but all board members being given a list of all of the applicants. Correct?
Correct.
Yes, Mr. Palermo.
Thank you, Madam President. I guess this is why I voted no in the beginning, to have HR or somebody inside do this process, because when Mr. Wakefield was first mentioned, you would have to ask him if he's going to apply for the job, because then he wouldn't be able to collect the applications. And not to put Mr. Ray on the spot, but you would have to ask him if he's going to apply for the job before you ask him to accept applications. So this is why I voted no to do it internally through HR. Maybe there's another process.
Mr. Snow.
Mr. Ray, are you interested in the interim superintendent job?
Boy, you've painted a beautiful picture. I mean, the last 3 hours, I think I've applied to Domino's and Village Inn.
Thank you.
So, not at this point, but thank you, Mr. Palermo.
Thank you for
But
your
if
consideration.
there is something that changes, I will surely, I'll put it in an email.
Thank you.
Other board discussion on the motion at hand? No, that is a good question. Thank you, Mr. Palermo. Okay, seeing no other board discussion, we will move forward with voting on the motion to have all applications go to Mr. Ray and the Accountability Committee, with the accountability bringing their top three, a recommendation of their top three to the board, along with a list of all applicants being given to the board. Roll call, please, Mr. Ray.
Scanlon,
No.
Snow, Williams,
Aye.
Gadding,
Aye.
Hallman,
Aye.
America,
Aye.
Palermo,
Aye.
Pearlman,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
8 aye.
Motion passes. I will say one thing we neglected in that is we did not say when the accountability committee is bringing those to the board. If we are doing that on the 17th,
I think
Mr.
applications
Snow?
close on the 12th. Is that what we voted on?
Correct.
So I move that the Accountability Committee make their recommendation to the board by April 17th board meeting. For the April 17th board meeting.
Second. Did you say bring the recommendations by the 17th?
Yes.
Second.
right, we have a motion by Mr. Snow with a second by Mr. Pearlman for the accountability committee to bring their recommendations to the board no later than April 17th. Correct? Mr. Snow?
And that will give the Accountability Committee, I'm thinking, have to be, sorry, they would have to have a special Accountability Committee meeting before then to go through and make those recommendations. So I'm looking at Accountability Committee individuals, but with Ms. Williams' suggestion as well, I'm sure we might have some people switch off before then.
Ms. Williams?
So I would just ask the board leadership, work on that and maybe have within the next day or so what that accountability committee looks like and inform the rest of the board as well. And I also think it might be in our best interest to, whatever that looks like, inform the community as well.
Mrs. Gadding?
So for candidates that we don't know, is there an interview process? I guess did I miss that in one of these motions?
We have to decide that.
Okay.
So with that coming in on the 17th, the Accountability Committee making that recommendation, I think it is something, obviously we will have to notify the individuals that we'll be making the recommendation. Is that correct, Mr. Ray? So the individuals, right, by the 17th. So those three or whoever, it might just be one person, would know that they'll be brought up in that meeting. The question to the board is, do we want to have a full interview process with this? I'm being real with you guys. Most likely, it's individuals that already know the community, that has probably been vetted, that people have vouched for. So I don't think we have to go through the full lengthy process, knowing that we're going to have to redo this process for the real superintendent search later on down the road. So is it having those individuals come at that meeting to, or the next meeting to give 5-minute speech, and then we vote? Where do you guys sit at?
And unless we change the motion at hand, that is not related to what we're currently
I
discussing,
understand.
because we are currently discussing the accountability committee and bringing it to the 17th meeting. If we want to change or add on to that motion to add more detail of what we will be doing on the 17th with those recommendations, we can do that.
I agree.
And I apologize that I am like a Parley Pro person, but
I was just trying to answer Ms.
I
Scotting's
am,
question.
yes, I understand, but I just wanted to clarify that for everyone as well. Ms. Williams?
So currently, the transition I mean, we also have to look at transition time, but again, we also have to get community feedback. We have a union, we have several unions, I know that is our sole role, to hire the superintendent, but we also have to give community feedback. If they bring a candidate on the 17th and we vote, then we really haven't allowed community input feedback. I'm sure that we will hear, and we've heard community feedback, but I think we also have to allow that, just like we would policy or anything else, we allow the public those additional 2 weeks to review policy. I think we should follow that same system of allowing public to, again, do we have forums? Time allow, I don't know if we can do that, but I think that the accountability, working with communications should come with some plan of how we engage the community. And I know we're not going to be able to solve that tonight, but I think that's important of the accountability committee to do that work when you next meet, and then bring that with you as soon as possible.
Mr. Snow?
Ms. Williams, so I completely agree with you on that. So I think we vote on this motion, and I think the next motion would be for the accountability to come up with a community process with the candidates that are recommended. Does that help?
Or you could make that part of this motion.
Yeah, you could,
That the accountability committee would bring
What was
their
the motion I read?
that the accountability committee make their top 3 recommendations no later than the 17th.
So I will amend my motion and say that the accountability committee make the recommendation of the top three candidates by the April 17th meeting with a format on how the community input will happen in the following week or coming weeks. So basically, I will have to redo that again. I'm trying to think of it. Mr. Perlman.
So it sounds like Mr. Snow is amending his motion to be that the accountability committee will bring their top 3 recommendations to the board no later than the April 17th meeting, and at that time they will also bring their proposal for community input related to the recommendations.
Correct.
Mr. Perlman, are you agreeable to that amendment as well? Since you seconded the motion.
The only thing we added was that they would bring up how they're going to engage the community with the candidates, the top candidates as well.
Yeah, I second that.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Williams?
So I really don't mean to be a pain about this process, but I think we owe it to our community to keep this process as transparent and open as possible. And this is the only way I believe we can do that. I understand that we need to figure out who the interim is going to be. But again, the past is the path. This is an opportunity for us to move forward as a board. We heard a lot about uniting and working collaboratively together. And I think this gives us an opportunity to show that we all are willing to be more transparent and work collaboratively with each other, with our staff, and with our community. So I just wanted to make that clarification before roll call.
Mrs. Goding?
So I just want to refer back to something Mr. Snow said, and I just want to make sure you're making the assumption that we all know the people who are going to apply and that they're all involved in the community. There may be someone out there we don't know. And I guess I just want to caution presupposition prior to ever receiving an application. So I just want to make sure that we're not making assumptions before we even know the facts and the information ahead of us. And I think we all ought to be careful in the words that we choose to use.
Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll do a roll call, and just to clarify, the motion is to have the accountability bring their recommendations for the top 3 candidates to the board no later than the April 17th meeting, along with their recommendations for a community input plan. Mr. Ray?
Snow.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Gadding.
No.
Holman.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
Palermo.
Aye.
Perlman.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Scanlon.
No.
7 aye.
Motion passes. Mr. Snow?
In response to Ms. Godding's caution, I think if that's the case, then do we even put a time that we select that individual? Because like you said, if we don't know if they're coming from the district, if we don't know who that individual is, obviously we would need to allow more time for that individual to meet with the community. Or I'm just trying to understand what you were.
Hence why I voted no. I'm not really sure what process we've completely set up here, and if we've limited, I mean, this is quite an interesting discussion, but I don't know if we've limited ourselves, and I don't know if we haven't, but I guess, but I think the motion passed, and we're where we're at, so we'll move forward.
So to give everyone a refresher of where we're at, so we decided we are taking applications for an interim superintendent. Those are being submitted through HR, but will go to Mr. Ray and the Accountability Committee. We will be accepting applications until April 12th. The application will consist of a resume, cover letter, and information sheet with the necessary legal information that we need to collect as a district. We are not allowing the person who's chosen as interim to apply for the full superintendent position. The Accountability Committee will review the applications and make a recommendation of the top 3, but the full board will receive a list of everyone who applies. The Accountability Committee will bring that recommendation for their top 3 to the April 17th board meeting along with the community input plan. So that is the process as we have laid it out tonight.
Can I?
Mr. Snow?
Any comments from any board members? I think this is coming off the previous board meeting, what happened. I think it is crucial that, obviously we voted, but for board members that support this process to speak up and say that. So we are all on board, so now we can go out and educate our constituents and our community and let them know about the process, as well as anybody that is interested in applying. I'm just trying to get your guys' feel that, I know some people voted no for one and yes for something, so I'm just trying to get your overall feel before we move forward. Is that okay? If you want to, you don't have to.
Mr. Perlman, I think you put your hand up.
I guess this is just taking big picture, stepping back, looking at where we've been and where we're going. Do we want to discuss what it will take to hire the interim? And what I mean by that is, would that person need 5 votes or the most votes?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that. Are you saying something to what something similar to what you said before, where you said, okay, you could make a motion for one person, take a vote, see how many votes they get, and then have someone nominate a second person? Is that, because I'm not clear on what you're asking.
Well, that's a fair question, but, right, do we want to discuss the voting process? Because if we end up with another situation of, test my math here, but 4-3-2.
Wait a minute. I'm
I would
confused.
ask Ms. Neelish-Grash to give us guidance on that, on if, I'm not sure.
The board would be required to have a motion, a roll call vote, and a majority of the Board of Education to support that individual.
So it not, like a 4-3-2 would not be a passing majority vote because the majority did not vote aye on the motion. Does that answer your question, Mr. Froman?
Partially. If I could ask Ms. Niels Brash to come up. I'm just wondering, is that for any and all motions, or is that specific to the hiring of superintendent or a board member?
Just stay up here. It's really hard to answer that question. There are certain motions that require a majority of the board, some motions which require supermajority of the board. Policy changes require a supermajority of the board, so it really depends on what you're voting on with regard to that. With 9 members, you require 5 board members to pass anything that the district, contract-wise, the district's doing. It will require a majority of the Board of Education.
Okay.
Ms. Williams?
So we're here at this process. And we've just motioned our way through the next process. And I'd only want to say that through this process, the board needs to seriously consider candidates. And in our discussion, obviously that will be a closed conversation. But quite honestly, to move forward with our district, I think we should be shooting, and I can't tell anyone how to vote, nor would I ever, but the suggestion for me would to have a unanimous vote on the interim so that we can move forward. We can't afford any more 5-4 or whatever the combination could be, should be, whatever. I think this is the next step in doing our job and hashing it out in closed session and coming out here and showing our community that we can unite and we can move forward. The longer we make this split vote and everything else that's gone on, we do our district damage, we hurt our students first and foremost, and we lose credibility to our community in the role that we're doing. So I think that's just up to each individual board member to consider that when we're looking at candidates, and to show up to this table to do business and listen to our community and our constituency. But at the end of the day, we have to come out here and vote our conscience and what's best for kids. Not what's best for whomever, but what's best for kids. And so that would be something that I would just reiterate to the board. This is, to me, this is our last shot, and we can't mess this up. So just do your due diligence in this seat as we're putting an interim in the seat.
Does anybody else want to talk?
Anyone else have comments? Mr. Snow?
All right, so we are here. I'm thankful that we were able to navigate these difficult waters to get to this point. But if you go back to our previous board meeting, there was a lot of people that came up in front of the board, including board members, that said transparency, transparency. And we went back into accountability committee, and literally the entire room was, how do we give more transparency to the entire board and to the community? And the recommendation out of that committee was to have the discussion at the board table. Now, moving forward, I do agree with Ms. Williams. We need to have, whoever this interim superintendent is, we need to have the entire board united to move forward. And I think that will not just unite the board, but our district staff and our community. I think we're so divided right now that I think it is up to this board that whoever we choose moving forward has to be that person that can unite the entire board, and not select few board members are going to just be ignored, but someone that will be able to unite this entire board and continue the great things that we're doing. And I think we could do that. And I think we have to put our personal things we might have with each other aside and really think of benevolence and how we can really help each other as board members make the best decision as we move forward for every kid that we serve in OPS. That's all that I have.
Okay, I think last week I had a couple asks of everybody. I'm gonna have a couple more this week. First off, if literally everyone can email Mr. Ray, and if you are on the accountability committee, let him know if you are interested in staying on the accountability committee, and if you are not on the accountability committee, if you are interested in being on the accountability committee. Since we did have, I heard a few requests tonight to look at the makeup of the committee and see if there are people who are interested in being on the committee. So if you can send that to Mr. Ray by the end of the day tomorrow, so that we can get that information, since we are having applications due on the 12th, and we're asking that committee to meet between the 12th and 17th to bring those recommendations to us. My ask of that committee with the community input plan, I would assume they would have recommendations for what that looks like, if that contains interview, and also what the date that they would anticipate the board actually deciding who the interim superintendent, that be a component of that plan that they bring to the board for final approval. Because obviously it would still require final board approval as well. Okay, I think we have covered item J2B. Mr. Perlman?
I guess I have questions about the makeup of the accountability committee, because I agree that there needs to be changes on the accountability committee, but what if nobody wants to be off the accountability committee? I mean, what recommendations are we making?
I want to be off the accountability committee.
Well, then, since committee assignments are determined by board officers, that is something we can look at.
But, Mr. Perlman, I guarantee you right now, we will have probably 3, if not the entire accountability committee step aside. And it's not as an embarrassment, as those board members saying they don't want to do this. I just think at the last board meeting, I can't speak for them, but for me, it was kind of embarrassing to be in this position and have people say some of the things they've said about you. So that's just me. Are we done?
Believe so. We do not have any repeated reports, so Mr. Snow.
I move that the Board of Education go into closed session for the protection of the public interest for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals, to discuss with the superintendent, secretary to the board, and legal counsel pending litigation, legal advice, and negotiations.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Snow and a second by Ms. Ryan. Roll call, please.
Williams,
Aye.
Dotting,
Aye.
Holman,
Aye.
America,
Aye.
Palermo,
Aye.
Perlman,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Scanlon, Snow.
Aye.
9-9.
Motion passes. Let me remind the board that the purpose for closed session is for the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputations of individuals, to discuss with the superintendent, secretary to the board, and legal counsel pending litigation, legal advice, and negotiation. Let the record reflect the board went into closed session at 10:28 p.m. And if everyone can be quick about getting to the closed session room, that would be appreciated.